The Seattle holiday dinner reeked of turkey and family betrayal. As my son Michael stood, Glass raised his voice, cold. "Dad, we voted you out. Leave this house." Guests froze. Emily smirked, but I handed him a folder. "Your parting gift, son." His scream shattered the air. $18 to $1,000. Debt lies exposed, sparking my family revenge in this karma story. A crushing holiday reveal waits. Follow the channel for more true family drama. I sat at the head of the old oak table, its surface scratched from decades of family dinners, my hands folded tightly to keep them steady. The dining room glowed with candlelight, casting soft shadows on the faces of my relatives, their chatter a warm hum that used to feel like home. But tonight, the warmth was forced like a blanket too thin to fend off the Washington winter chill. Michael's words, no longer family, still echoed a punch to the gut that stole my breath. The folder I'd handed him lay open, its pages scattered near the turkey platter, drawing stunned glances from my cousin Linda and Sarah, Elizabeth's old friend. Their faces showed shock, unease, as Michael stood frozen, his glass trembling, Emily's sly smile faltering under my calm stare. The silence was heavy, the air thick with expectation. Linda's fork hovered midair, her eyes wide. Sarah gripped her coffee mug, knuckles pale. Other guests shifted their whispers, swallowed by the stillness. I'd stood slowly, my chair scraping the hardwood, the sound louder than it should have been, when I slid the folder across the table, its thud against the platter, a signal of my fight. Michael's scream had shattered the room, his hands shaking as he saw the eviction notice, bold and unyielding, addressed to him and Emily. The folder held more proof of their lies, their debts, their schemes. But I held back, letting the chaos unfold without revealing the full storm. My mind drifted to 1983, the year Michael was born, when I held him in the hospital, his tiny fingers curling around mine. I sold my old Chevy to cover his first school fees, telling Elizabeth it was just a car. She'd squeezed my hand, her smile saying she knew better. We believed in him and the family we'd build in this Seattle house, every nail driven by my hands during overtime at Pacific Builders. That memory twisted now, a knife in my chest, as I looked at the man he'd become, standing there, face red with shock, the folder's truths burning between us. I'd given him everything, $15,000. For college, in 2003, double shifts to keep this roof over his head, never hearing a thank you. After Elizabeth's cancer took her in 2022, he drifted, pulled by Emily's sharp ambition. I traced the tables, scratch Michael's initials from 1993, when he was 10, grinning with a butter knife, proud of his small rebellion. That boy was gone, replaced by a man egged on by a woman who saw me as a relic. The silence pressed against me, but my pulse held steady, a resolve forming beneath the hurt. This wasn't just about the house or money. It was about trust broken beyond repair. I'd learned blind trust invites ruin, a lesson for anyone. Questions sudden demands, check their motives. Michael's hands trembled, clutching the folder papers, spilling like confessions. Emily whispered to him, her voice a desperate hiss, but their faces told me enough: shock, fear, the dawning truth I wasn't the pushover they'd banked on. I stood again, boots heavy on the floor, moving toward the dining room door. Its chipped paint, a reminder of better days, with Elizabeth's laughter in the walls. Michael called after me, his tone shifting. "What, you're just going to sulk?" I didn't answer. The door loomed, my hand on the knob, cold metal grounding me. Inside, a fire burned, not anger, but purpose. They'd tried to erase me from my home, but I'd given them everything: time, dreams, sacrifices. No more. The hallway stretched dark, the Seattle rain now tapping the windows, a shift from the snow mirroring the storm I'd unleash. I stepped through the door, clicking shut, the guests' voices fading. This was my turning point, from father who waited to man who fought back their mistake, thinking the folder was the end. The dining room still buzzed with the aftermath of Michael's words, His declaration that I was no longer family, echoing like a bad song stuck in my head. The Seattle chill seeped through the windows, frosting the edges, but the tension at our old oak table burned hotter than the candles flickering in their holders. I sat back down, my hands folded tightly to keep them from shaking the folder I'd handed Michael, now a silent weapon between us. Its pages scattered near the turkey platter drew curious glances from my cousin Linda and Sarah Elizabeth's old friend, their faces a mix of shock and unease. Michael stood frozen, his glass trembling, while Emily's sly smile lingered, though it wavered under the weight of my calm stare. The room's warmth felt hollow, like a promise broken, and I knew this was only the start. Michael slammed his glass down, the clink sharp against the quiet, his face flushed with wine and frustration. "Dad, we need the money!" He snapped, his voice loud enough to rattle the glasses. "This house is falling apart, and you're just sitting on cash, hoarding it like some miser." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my tone even, my fingers gripping the cold metal of my fork for grounding. "Hoarding?" I said softly. "I paid the mortgage on this place before you were born, Michael." "What's this really about?" Emily leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on the table, each click like a countdown to something worse. "It's about progress, Henry," she said, her smile thin as the ice outside. "New floors, new furniture, a modern life. You wouldn't understand." I understood plenty. Their talk of repairs was a flimsy excuse, a veil for something uglier. My eyes flicked to Emily's phone, propped against her wine glass, its screen glowing with a glossy photo of a leather handbag, the kind that cost $3,000 more than my old truck was worth when I sold it to pay for Michael's school fees. That was the mini twist that hit me, a realization that cut deeper than Michael's words. This wasn't about fixing the house. It was about their greed, their hunger for a life they hadn't earned. My chest tightened, a familiar ache rising, but I kept my face steady, letting their accusations wash over me like the Seattle rain outside. The room grew quieter, the guests' eyes darting between us, waiting for me to crack. Michael paced now, his hands gesturing wildly like he was conducting his own chaos. "You're so damn selfish," he spat, his voice rising. "You think you're some saint, but you're holding us back." Emily nodded, her lips twitching, barely hiding her satisfaction. I traced the familiar scratch on the table, Michael's initials carved in 1993 when he was 10, back when he'd run to me with a gap-toothed grin, butter knife in hand, proud of his little rebellion. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as an obstacle, egged on by a woman whose sharp ambition had sunk claws into him since their 2015 wedding, when I gifted them this house to live in rent-free. The memory of that wedding stung, a day filled with hope, now tainted by their betrayal. I'd stood there proud, handing over the keys, thinking it was a foundation for their future, a continuation of the family Elizabeth and I had built. She'd been there, her warm eyes sparkling, squeezing my hand as we watched them dance. Now, 3 years after her death in 2022, I was alone at this table, surrounded by faces, but feeling like a stranger in my own home. The weight of their words pressed against my chest. Not just anger, but a deep, aching hurt, the kind that comes when you realize love has been replaced by entitlement. I set the fork down, deliberate, my knuckles white from the grip. "Selfish," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air, heavy with irony. Michael leaned closer, his breath hot with wine. "You're damn right," he said. "We can handle this place without you, Dad." The air shifted thick with the finality of his words. Emily's eyes glinted, her smile sharper now, as if she'd been waiting for this explosion. I could have shouted back, listed every sacrifice, the overtime at Pacific Builders, the college tuition, the car I sold to keep them afloat. but words wouldn't reach them. Not anymore. Instead, I let my gaze drift to the table to that old scratch from 1993, a relic of a time when Michael still looked at me like I was his hero. The realization hit hard. Their greed wasn't just about money. It was about erasing me, erasing the life Elizabeth and I had built. My mindset shifted, a quiet clarity forming through the haze of hurt. Generational conflicts, I thought, stem from unchecked entitlement, the kind that grows when you give too much without setting boundaries. If I'd learned anything, it was that early financial limits in family could have saved me this pain, a lesson I'd pass on to anyone listening. Set those boundaries before trust turns to dust. The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the table, the untouched plates, and cold coffee a testament to the battle unfolding. Michael sat back down, his face still red, muttering something to Emily, who nodded, her phone still glowing with that damning photo. I stood my chair, scraping the hardwood, the sound a quiet rebellion of its own. "I've heard enough," I said, my voice low but firm, cutting through their murmurs. The guests stirred, Linda's eyes narrowing, Sarah's hand tightening on her mug. I walked toward the dining room door, my boots heavy on the floor, each step a reminder of the house I'd built, nail by nail, for a family that no longer valued it. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob, the chipped paint rough under my fingers. The folder's contents burned in my mind, proof of their $18,000 lies, their schemes, their betrayal. They thought they'd won this round, that I'd slink away a broken old man. But I wasn't broken. I was awake. The hallway stretched dark before me, the Seattle snow falling outside soft and relentless, mirroring the storm I was about to unleash. I stepped through, letting the door close behind me, the muffled voices fading. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something they'd never see coming. The dining room door clicked shut behind me, muffling the chaos of Michael's accusations and the guests' shocked whispers. My boots echoed on the hardwood as I stepped into the dark hallway of our Seattle home, the air colder here, heavy with the weight of betrayal. Each step felt heavier, like the house itself was pressing down its walls, holding memories of better days now tainted by tonight's venom. I didn't look back. My hand brushed the chipped paint of the doorframe, a reminder of summers spent fixing this place with Elizabeth, her laughter mixing with the smell of fresh paint. That warmth was gone, replaced by a hollow ache that followed me to my bedroom, where the silence was louder than the dinner table storm. The old bed creaked under my weight, its sagging mattress a testament to years of restless nights. The room was a time capsule, every corner whispering Elizabeth's presence, her soft curls framed in the photo on the nightstand. I pulled it closer, my fingers trembling as they traced her warm eyes, still vivid despite her death from cancer in 2022. The grief hit like a wave, amplifying the isolation that had settled in this Seattle house I'd built nail by nail during overtime shifts at Pacific Builders. 3 years without her, and the loneliness was a constant companion made sharper tonight by Michael's words, "No longer family." I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the ache spread, a raw, pulsing wound that no amount of turkey or holiday cheer could mend. Her smile in the photo steadied me, just as it always had. Elizabeth had been my anchor, the one who'd squeezed my hand when I sold our truck to cover Michael's school fees, her eyes saying we were doing right by our boy. Now alone in this dim light, I felt the sting of how wrong we'd been. Michael's betrayal wasn't just about money or the house. It was about erasing everything we'd built, everything she'd believed in. My gaze fell to the nightstand drawer, its wood worn smooth from years of use. I opened it, pulling out a single folded receipt, yellowed with age, dated 2003. $15,000 paid to the University of Washington for Michael's tuition, a sacrifice I'd made with aching back and calloused hands, believing it was an investment in his future and ours. The receipt crinkled in my grip, and I whispered to Elizabeth's photo, my voice rough with unshed tears. We gave him everything, Liz, and he never said thank you. The realization was a mini twist, a quiet knife that cut through the fog of grief. I'd enabled him for too long, pouring my life into a son who now stood in my dining room, spitting venom with his wife's encouragement. My resolve hardened a vow forming in the stillness. No more. I wouldn't let them take what was left of me, of us. Honoring her legacy meant protecting myself, a mindset that settled like a cornerstone in my chest. If I'd learned anything, it was that documenting sacrifices, keeping records of what you've given, brings clarity when family ties turn to traps. My fingers lingered on the photo, but my eyes shifted to the phone on the nightstand, its screen dark in the dim glow of the lamp. I reached for it, the weight of the decision grounding me. Tom Hargrove's number was at the top of my recent calls. His gruff voice, a lifeline from our days arguing over blueprints at Pacific Builders. I needed his advice, his knack for cutting through nonsense. My thumb hovered, then pressed call, the soft ring breaking the room's silence. He picked up, his voice rough but familiar, like the creak of this old house. "Henry, what's going on?" he asked, sensing the edge in my pause. I took a breath, the words heavy but necessary. They crossed a line. "Tom," I said, "I need to fight back." The call was brief, his advice sharp, hit them where it hurts, money, pride. I hung up, my pulse, steadying the room's shadows, no longer suffocating, but alive with purpose. The snow fell outside, dusting the Seattle street in white, its quiet beauty a stark contrast to the storm inside me. I set the photo down, Elizabeth's eyes still watching, and tucked the receipt back in the drawer. That piece of paper wasn't just a memory, it was evidence, a reminder of what I'd given and what they'd taken for granted. My mindset shifted, clear and unyielding. True family stories aren't just about love, they're about standing firm when that love is betrayed. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to keep track of what you've sacrificed, because clarity is your shield when the ones you love turn against you. I stood crossing to the window, the cold glass chilling my palm, as I looked out at the snow-covered neighborhood. The Christmas lights blinked through the haze, a mockery of the warmth I'd once felt in this house. Michael and Emily were still in the dining room, probably plotting their next move, thinking they'd won. They didn't know I'd already taken the first step. Tom's words echoed money, pride, and I knew where to start: their finances, their weaknesses. The folder I'd given Michael was just a spark, the real fire was coming. I turned from the window, my boots quiet on the creaky floor, and headed for the door. The night was young, and so was my fight. The house groaned softly as I stepped into the hallway, its familiar sounds urging me forward, ready for what came next. The hallway's chill lingered as I stepped out into the Seattle night snow, crunching under my boots, each flake a quiet reminder of the storm brewing inside me. The betrayal at the Christmas dinner still burned, Michael's words, no longer family, echoing like a drum in my skull. My breath clouded in the frosty air, but my mind was sharp focused as I walked toward the Old Oak Bar, a dive just a few blocks from our house. Its neon sign flickered, casting a pale glow over the sidewalk, and I pushed through the heavy door, the familiar scent of whiskey and worn leather wrapping around me like an old friend. I needed Tom Hargrove, his gruff wisdom from our days at Pacific Builders, to help me make sense of this mess. Inside the bar hummed with low conversation, a jukebox playing some country tune Elizabeth used to hum while cooking. I slid into a corner booth, the vinyl seat creaking under me, my hands wrapping around a glass of bourbon Tom had ordered before I arrived. He sat across, his gray sweater frayed at the cuffs, just like it was back when we argued over blueprints in the 80s. His eyes narrowed as I recounted the dinner, Michael's venom, Emily's smirk, the folder that made them flinch. "They're vultures, Henry," he said, his voice gravelly, sipping his beer. "They think you're old, weak, ready to be pecked apart. You gonna let them? I swirled the bourbon, watching the amber liquid catch the dim light. Its surface still untouched, mirroring my steady pulse despite the fire in my chest. No, I said, my voice low but firm. I'm done letting them. Tom grinned, a rare thing that meant trouble for someone. Good, he said. Hit them where it hurts money pride. Find their weak spot. I nodded, pulling a small notebook from my coat pocket, the pen scratching as I jotted down Michael's car sales job, a detail I'd overheard from his late-night calls. His finances were a mess, always chasing the next big sale, the next shiny toy, while Emily's Instagram was a shrine to a life they couldn't afford. The memory of their 2015 wedding surfaced unbidden a day when I'd handed over the keys to this house rent-free, thinking it was a gift for their future. Elizabeth had been there, her smile bright, as we watched them dance, believing we were building a legacy. Now that memory twisted, a bitter reminder of how they'd turned my generosity into a weapon. Tom leaned forward, his glass clinking against the table, his eyes glinting with something sharp. You know, I had a client once, he said, voice dropping. Son tried to pull the same stunt, wanted the house, the savings, called his dad a burden. We buried him in court, froze his accounts, left him with nothing but regret. That was the mini twist, a spark that fueled my fire. Tom's story wasn't just talk, it was a mirror showing me what Michael and Emily were aiming for, a grab for everything I'd built. My jaw tightened, the bourbon still untouched its calm surface, a contrast to the rage building inside. My jaw tightened, the bourbon still untouched its calm surface, a contrast to the rage building inside. They thought they could erase me just like that client's son, but I wasn't going down without a fight. My mindset shifted, clear and unyielding. Empowerment against toxic families starts with seeing their true colors, a lesson I'd learned too late, but would use now. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to consult trusted friends early before the cracks in family ties become chasms. Tom's advice wasn't just words, it was a blueprint, like the ones we used to draft at Pacific Builders, precise and unbreakable. I scribbled more notes. Michael's late car payments, Emily's flinch when the credit card reader beeped too long at the store. Their pride was tied to appearances, their money a house of cards ready to collapse. I leaned back, the booth's vinyl squeaking, my pulse steady, but my mind racing. The bar's hum faded, the jukebox switching to another slow tune, and I felt a clarity I hadn't had in years. You sure about this? Tom asked, his voice low, eyes searching mine. Once you start, there's no going back. I met his gaze, unwavering. They made their choice, I said. Now I make mine. He nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes, raising his glass. To consequences, he said. I clinked my glass against his, the bourbon still untouched, its stillness, a promise of my own. To justice, I added the word, heavy with intent. The plan was forming, pieces clicking like the blueprints I used to draw each note in my notebook, a brick in their downfall. I stood tossing a few bills on the table, the bourbon's amber glow catching the light one last time. The bar door groaned as I pushed it open, the cold biting my face, snow crunching under my boots. The Seattle street stretched quiet before me, Christmas lights blinking in the distance, a cruel contrast to the warmth I'd lost. Tom's words echoed money pride, and I knew exactly where to start. Michael and Emily had built their lives on my foundation, but I knew where the cracks were, and I'd widen them until their world crumbled. The snow fell heavier now, blanketing the sidewalk, and I walked on each step, a promise of the storm I'd unleash next. The Seattle snow fell heavier as I left the old oak bar. Tom's words, money, pride ringing in my ears like a call to arms. The cold bit at my face, but my steps were steady, each crunch on the sidewalk, pulling me closer to the house that held both my past and my fight. The Christmas lights from neighboring homes flickered their warmth, a cruel contrast to the cold betrayal I'd uncovered in the kitchen. Michael's groggy voice, calling my name, had faded behind me, but the weight of his actions, his greed pressed against my chest, urging me forward. The next move was clear. I needed to know more, and Sarah Thompson, Elizabeth's old friend, was the one to tell me. The cozy cafe on Pike Street smelled of burnt coffee and cinnamon, its wooden tables cluttered with holiday shoppers' bags. I settled near the window, the steam rising in lazy curls as the gray Seattle day pressed against the glass. Sarah slid into the seat across from me, her red scarf a splash of color against her worn coat, her eyes wide with worry as she leaned closer. "Henry, I heard something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, glancing around as if someone might overhear. My heart thudded, not from fear, but anticipation, the weight of the phone recording in my pocket grounding me. "What is it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "They're planning a big Christmas dinner," she said, her spoon clinking against her cup. "Michael and Emily invited the whole family. Linda, your cousins, everyone. They're going to announce you're unfit, push for guardianship, get everyone on their side." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch, my fingers tightening around the mug. "So, that's their game," I said, my tone calm, though my chest burned with the betrayal's raw edge. "They weren't just after the house, they wanted to strip me of everything, my dignity, my legacy." Sarah hesitated, her eyes softening. "Linda's worried," she said. "Michael's got her half convinced you're not yourself. Emily's been texting everyone saying you're a danger to yourself." That was the mini twist, a sharp jab that deepened the wound. Their lies had spread beyond the dining room, weaving a net to trap me, and Linda's text from last night was just the start. My jaw clenched, but my mind raced, piecing together their plan, a public humiliation dressed as concern. I leaned back the chair, creaking, my gaze drifting to the steam curling from my coffee like the unresolved grief that clung to me since Elizabeth's death in 2022. Sarah's voice pulled me back. "It's awful, Henry," she said, her scarf slipping as she leaned closer. "It reminds me of my own daughter-in-law years ago. She tried to cut me out of my husband's will, claimed I was losing it all to get his lake house. I fought back, found her lies in bank records, and won. You can too." Her story, raw and real, like something you'd read on Reddit, struck a chord mirroring my own fight. It wasn't just talk, it was a spark, showing me the path I was already on, gathering evidence, building a case. Emotionally, I felt the steam curl, like the pain in my chest, a reminder of Elizabeth's laughter from her nursing days with Sarah, when they'd share stories of patience and hope. Those memories eased my grief, but they also sharpened my resolve. A mindset forming women's resilience in generational conflicts is a quiet strength, one I'd draw on now. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to seek support from old friends in crises, because they see what family sometimes blinds you to. Sarah's eyes softened, her hand hovering near mine. "You're not surprised, are you?" she asked, her brow furrowed. I shook my head, my voice low. "They've been building to this," I said. "I just didn't expect them to play so dirty." She nodded, her spoon clinking again, a sound as steady as my pulse. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I met her gaze, my jaw tight. "I won't let them win," I said. "They're counting on me to crumble, but they'll get a surprise instead." The words felt like a vow, not just to her, but to Elizabeth, to the life we'd built in this Seattle house, nail by nail, through my years at Pacific Builders. I stood tossing a few bills on the table, my coat heavy with the notebook and phone recording inside. The cafe door jingled as I stepped out, the cold, biting my face, snow dusting my shoulders. Sarah's story, her fight against her own toxic in-law, was a map guiding me to the next step. Michael and Emily thought they could ambush me at that Christmas dinner, rallying the family to their lies. But I had the recording, the folder, the truth, and now a clearer picture of their plan. The Seattle street stretched before me, the snow falling soft but relentless, mirroring my resolve. I needed to return to John's office to stack more proof, to widen the cracks in their world. The fight was far from over, and I was ready to keep pushing. The glass doors of John Reynolds' office swung shut behind me, the Seattle skyline fading as I stepped into the snowy street, the weight of the folder under my arm. A quiet anchor. The signed will, the frozen account, the house trust. They were the first bricks in my defense, a wall Michael and Emily didn't know was rising. My phone buzzed again. Michael's name flashing his panic over the locked account, a silent victory I ignored. The snow fell soft, dusting my coat, but the fire in my chest burned hotter, fueled by the $18,000 lies I'd uncovered in the kitchen, the hotel charge hinting at Emily's secrets. The Washington night was quiet, but my resolve burned brighter, fueled by the $18,000 lies I'd uncovered in the kitchen, the hotel charge hinting at Emily's secrets. The downtown office was a fortress of glass and steel, its sleek walls reflecting the glinting Seattle skyline under a pale winter sun. I sat across from John, his crisp suit, a stark contrast to my worn coat draped over the chair, the air sharp with the scent of coffee and ink. Papers spread before us like a battle map, each one a piece of my plan to protect what was mine. John adjusted his glasses, scanning my notes, his pen tapping a steady rhythm as I recounted the dinner. Michael's venom, Emily's smirk, the folder that had shaken them. "You're sure about this, Henry?" he asked, his voice low, eyes flicking up from the page. "It's a bold move." I nodded, my hands steady on the table. They crossed a line. "John," I said, "I'm taking back what's mine." He slid the first document toward me, a revised will naming a Seattle children's charity as my beneficiary, cutting Michael and Emily out completely. The house, my savings, everything I'd built with Elizabeth over decades gone from their reach. I read it carefully, my old engineering habits kicking in, every clause airtight, just as I'd wanted. My pen scratched across the page, signing away their inheritance, a quiet victory that felt heavier than I expected. Michael was still my son, the boy I'd held in 1983, but that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd spat in my face. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the next paper, a bank form to freeze the joint account. Michael still used a relic from when I'd helped him buy his first car in 2005. His laziness in never closing it was about to cost him. John tapped his pen, discussing the contractor estimate Michael had waived at the first dinner, bloated with unnecessary upgrades, a $20,000 facade for their greed now dwarfed by the affair evidence. "It's a pattern," he said, his voice clipped. "They push, you give, they take more." "Not this time," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest, a burning resolve that had grown since slipping out the kitchen side door. We moved to the final document, a trust for the house under Washington state law, ensuring they couldn't force a sale. John explained, his pen-scratching notes as sole trustee. "You hold the reins, Henry. If they try to push you out, this gives you legal ground." I signed the pen heavy, each stroke sealing their fate like a hammer driving nails at Pacific builders. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the screen glowing with Michael's name, a missed call. I ignored it, but it buzzed again, insistent, a frantic edge to the vibration. That was the mini-twist confirmation that the bank had moved fast, locking the account just as I'd planned. Michael was feeling the ground shift, though he didn't yet know why. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my pulse steadied, grounded by the cold glass wall behind me, its chill, a stark contrast to the fire inside. Emotionally, I felt rooted not by anger, but by purpose, a mindset that legal safeguards in American inheritance disputes are a shield for the betrayed. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to update your estate plans promptly after life changes, because trust can turn to dust overnight. John stacked the papers, his expression softening. "You okay, Henry?" he asked. "This isn't easy, cutting your son out." I looked at him, my jaw tight. "It's necessary," I said, my grip strong. The nursing home threat wasn't just a rumor, it was a plan to lock me away to sell the house I'd built with Elizabeth to erase our legacy. The pain of her loss, the sting of Michael's betrayal fueled me, but so did the clarity of what I had to do. The Seattle streets waited outside, the snow falling soft but relentless, mirroring my resolve. I stood tucking the confirmation slip from the bank into my pocket, its crisp edges a reminder of the first blow landed. The office's hum swallowed my footsteps as I walked toward the door, the skyline outside gleaming through the snow-dusted glass, a city alive with possibility, even in winter. I paused at the door, my hand on the handle, the weight of the folder under my arm grounding me. Michael's calls meant he was rattled. That was just the start. The trust, the will, the frozen account, they were feeling it now. The Seattle cold wrapped around me as I stepped out, but it didn't slow me down. The battle was far from over, and I was ready to keep pushing. The glass doors of John Reynolds' office swung shut behind me, the Seattle skyline fading as I stepped into the snowy street, the weight of the folder under my arm a quiet anchor. The signed will, the frozen account, the house trust. They were the first bricks in my defense, a wall Michael and Emily didn't know was rising. My phone buzzed again, Michael's name flashing his panic over the locked account, a silent victory I ignored. The snow fell soft, dusting my coat, but the fire in my chest burned hotter, fueled by the $18,000 lies I'd uncovered in the kitchen, the hotel charge hinting at Emily's secrets. The Washington night was quiet, but my resolve burned brighter, fueled by the $18,000 lies I'd uncovered in the kitchen, the hotel charge hinting at Emily's secrets. Back in the house, the silence was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge and the groan of old pipes. Midnight had long passed, the Seattle darkness cloaking the rooms in shadows. I moved quietly, my boots soft on the hardwood, avoiding the creaky spots I'd fixed over decades with Pacific builders. The dining room's chaos from Christmas felt distant now, but Michael's words, no longer family, echoed like a wound that wouldn't close. I slipped into the hallway, the air colder here, the chipped paint of the doorframes brushing my fingers like ghosts of Elizabeth's laughter. My phone, set to record, glowed faintly in my hand, its light a beacon in the dark, as I pressed myself against the wall near the living room where Michael and Emily's voices drifted low and conspiratorial. They sat on the leather couch, unaware I was listening, Emily's phone propped against a wine glass, its screen glowing with photos of luxury lofts, sleek and modern, nothing like the home I'd built. "We need to move fast," Michael whispered, his voice tight. "He's not himself. Emily, we can't let him ruin us." She leaned closer, her voice smooth, calculating. "He's old, vulnerable," she said. "A guardianship hearing will fix this. We'll sell the house, start fresh." My heart thudded, not from fear, but from the raw finality of their plan. The screen shifted, a text notification popping up clear. Even from my angle, "Meet me at the hotel tomorrow, 8 p.m. No initials, just a number I didn't recognize. That was the spark, a clearer hint of Emily's affair, a betrayal deeper than money tying to the hotel charge I'd found. I adjusted my phone, capturing every word, my pulse steady despite the betrayal's sting. Their plot to declare me unfit wasn't just greed. It was a calculated erasure, a way to strip me of everything I'd built with Elizabeth. My chest tightened, the air thick with the weight of their deception, but my hands didn't shake. Years of maintaining this house, knowing every creak, every loose board, gave me an edge. I shifted slightly, the floor groaning under my weight, and Michael's head snapped up. "Dad," he called, his voice sharp, suspicious. His shadow loomed in the doorway, tall and unsteady, as I froze, my breath held, the phone still recording. The mini twist came as my phone buzzed softly, a text from Linda, my sister-in-law, lighting up the screen. "Henry, what's going on? Michael says you're not well. Call me." My jaw clenched, their rumors already spreading, poisoning the family I'd spent decades supporting. They were moving faster than I'd thought, painting me as unstable to anyone who'd listen. The sting of betrayal deepened, but it wasn't despair. It was fuel. I slipped the phone into my pocket, easing toward the hallway's end. My breath held the phone still recording. The mini twist came as my phone buzzed softly, a text from Linda, my sister-in-law, lighting up the screen. "Henry, what's going on?" "Michael says, you're not well, call me." My jaw clenched, their rumors already spreading, poisoning the family I'd spent decades supporting. They were moving faster than I'd thought, painting me as unstable to anyone who'd listen. The sting of betrayal deepened, but it wasn't despair. It was fuel. I slipped the phone into my pocket, easing toward the hallway's end, my boots silent on the familiar floor. Michael's footsteps paused, the living room light casting his shadow longer, but I melted into the darkness, my knowledge of this house a shield they couldn't pierce. I reached the back door, its hinges quiet from years of my care, and slipped outside, the Seattle snow muffling my steps. The cold bit at my face, but my mind was clear, the recorded words a weapon sharper than the folder I'd given Michael at dinner. Emily's affair, their guardianship plot, the $18,000, lies they were threads in a web I was unraveling. My mindset hardened. Eavesdropping reveals true intentions in toxic relationships. A truth I'd learned too late, but would use now. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to trust your instincts over words, because family can hide knives behind smiles. The snow fell heavier, blanketing the backyard. The Christmas lights from neighboring houses glowing faintly through the haze. I stood by the garage, my breath clouding in the air, replaying their words in my head. They thought they could lock me out, not just from the house, but from my own life. The folder was my first strike, but this recording, this proof, was the real blow. My fingers brushed the notebook in my pocket, its pages filling with their secrets. The house loomed behind me, its silhouette dark against the snowy sky, a reminder of everything I'd built and everything they wanted to take. I turned, my boots crunching through the snow, heading back to the street. The night was quiet, but my plan was loud, each step a promise to widen the cracks in their world. Linda's text meant they were rallying allies, but I had my own John, Tom, Sarah, and the truth. The Seattle cold wrapped around me, but it didn't slow me down. The fight was far from over, and I was ready to keep pushing. The Seattle snow swirled outside as I walked away from the house, my boots crunching through the frosted grass. The recorded whispers of Michael and Emily's guardianship plot heavy in my pocket. Their voices, sharp with deceit, echoed in my mind. Emily's text about a secret hotel meeting, a dark thread I couldn't yet pull. Linda's text, questioning my health, had lit a fire, their rumors spreading like wildfire through our family. The Christmas lights blinked in the distance, a hollow reminder of the warmth I'd lost, but my resolve burned brighter, fueled by the $18,000 lies I'd uncovered, and the folder that had shaken them at the first dinner. Tom's advice hit their money. Their pride echoed from the bar, and Sarah's warning pushed me toward John Reynolds' office, where I'd stack the proof to bury their schemes. The cozy cafe on Pike Street smelled of burnt coffee and cinnamon, its wooden tables cluttered with holiday shoppers' bags. I settled near the window, the steam rising in lazy curls as the gray Seattle day pressed against the glass. Sarah slid into the seat across from me, her red scarf a splash of color against her worn coat, her eyes wide with worry as she leaned closer. "Henry, I heard something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, glancing around as if someone might overhear. My heart thudded, not from fear, but anticipation, the weight of the phone recording in my pocket grounding me. "What is it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "They're planning a big Christmas dinner," she said, her spoon clinking against her cup. "Michael and Emily invited the whole family. Linda, your cousins, everyone. They're going to announce you're unfit. Push for guardianship, get everyone on their side." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch, my fingers tightening around the mug. "So that's their game," I said, my tone calm, though my chest burned with the betrayal's raw edge. They weren't just after the house. They wanted to strip me of everything, my dignity, my legacy. Sarah hesitated, her eyes softening. Linda's worried, she said. Michael's got her half convinced you're not yourself. Emily's been texting everyone saying you're a danger to yourself. That was the mini twist, a sharp jab that deepened the wound. Their lies had spread beyond the dining room, weaving a net to trap me, and Linda's text from last night was just the start. My jaw clenched, but my mind raced, piecing together their plan, a public humiliation dressed as concern. I leaned back the chair, creaking, my gaze drifting to the steam curling from my coffee like the unresolved grief that clung to me since Elizabeth's death in 2022. Sarah's voice pulled me back. It's awful, Henry, she said, her scarf slipping as she leaned closer. It reminds me of my own daughter-in-law years ago. She tried to cut me out of my husband's will, claimed I was losing it all to get his lake house. I fought back, found her lies and bank records, and won. You can too. Her story, raw and real like something you'd read on Reddit, struck a chord mirroring my own fight. It wasn't just talk, it was a spark showing me the path I was already on, gathering evidence, building a case. Emotionally, I felt the steam curl, like the pain in my chest, a reminder of Elizabeth's laughter from her nursing days with Sarah, when they'd share stories of patience and hope. Those memories eased my grief, but they also sharpened my resolve. A mindset forming women's resilience in generational conflicts is a quiet strength, one I draw on now. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to seek support from old friends in crises, because they see what family sometimes blinds you to. Sarah's eyes softened, her hand hovering near mine. You're not surprised, are you? She asked, her brow furrowed. I shook my head, my voice low. They've been building to this, I said. I just didn't expect them to play so dirty. She nodded, her spoon clinking again, a sound as steady as my pulse. What are you going to do? She asked. I met her gaze, my jaw tight. I won't let them win, I said. They're counting on me to crumble, but they'll get a surprise instead. The words felt like a vow, not just to her, but to Elizabeth, to the life we'd built in this Seattle house, nail by nail, through my years at Pacific Builders. I stood tossing a few bills on the table, my coat heavy with the notebook and phone recording inside. The cafe door jingled as I stepped out the cold, biting my face, snow dusting my shoulders. Sarah's story, her fight against her own toxic in-law, was a map guiding me to the next step. Michael and Emily thought they could ambush me at that Christmas dinner, rallying the family to their lies. But I had the recording, the folder, the truth, and now a clearer picture of their plan. The Seattle street stretched before me, the snow falling soft but relentless, mirroring my resolve. I needed to return to John's office, to stack more proof, to widen the cracks in their world. The fight was far from over, and I was ready to keep pushing. With John, papers like a battle map, we finalize eviction and court order against guardianship, hinting at nursing home threats to align with audience insight. Subplot of court hearing grows with screenshots of Emily's affair texts. Mini twist affair. Evidence in debts sets my jaw with purpose. Inner fire tempers into calm mindset that preparation turns revenge into justice, actionable by gathering evidence methodically. The Seattle snow dusted my coat as I entered John's office. Sarah's words about Michael and Emily's Christmas guardianship plan burning in my mind. Their lies spreading like the flakes covering the streets. Her story of fighting her toxic daughter-in-law had given me a map. But the recording in my pocket, their whispered plot, and Emily's affair text, was the compass. Her story of fighting her toxic daughter-in-law had given me a map, but the recording in my pocket, their whispered plot, and Emily's affair text, was the compass. The city's gray sky pressed down, but my resolve pushed back, fueled by the $10,000 debt and hotel charges I'd uncovered. Her story of fighting her toxic daughter-in-law had given me a map, but the recording in my pocket, their whispered plot, and Emily's affair text was the compass. John's downtown office gleamed with glass and steel, the skyline glinting through the windows as I sat across from him. Papers spread like a battle map on the polished table. His crisp suit contrasted my worn coat, the air sharp with coffee and ink. "We're finalizing this, Henry," he said. His voice clipped but approving. "Eviction notice. Court order against guardianship. It's ironclad." I nodded, my hands steady despite the fire in my chest, a fire that had grown since the hallway shadows. "They even mentioned a nursing home," John added, his eyes narrowing, "claiming you need care to sell it to the family." That hit like a punch, a nursing home threat tying to their lies about my health, a betrayal deeper than the $18,000 debt or Emily's hotel meetings. My jaw clenched, but I stayed calm, my fingers brushing the folder I'd brought, now thicker with new evidence. "Let's make sure they can't touch me," I said, my voice low but firm. John slid the eviction notice across bold print, addressed to Michael and Emily, giving them 30 days to vacate under Washington law. I signed, the pen scratching like a nail driven into their plans, each stroke a step closer to justice. The court order followed, blocking their guardianship push, citing elder protection statutes I'd learned about from John's meticulous explanations. My phone sat heavy in my pocket, loaded with screenshots of Emily's texts pulled from a cloud account Michael hadn't bothered to secure. The affair subplot grew clearer, one text mentioning a secret meeting at a hotel, another hinting at a man who wasn't my son, tied to the cloud account Michael hadn't bothered to secure. The affair subplot grew clearer, one text mentioning a secret meeting at a hotel, another hinting at a man who wasn't my son, tied to the $3,000 bag charge I'd found. That was the mini twist, uncovering affair evidence in their debts, setting my jaw with purpose. My inner fire didn't flare. It tempered into a calculated calm, a mindset that thorough preparation turns revenge stories into justice. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to gather evidence methodically in disputes, because truth is a blade that cuts clean. John leaned back, his pen pausing. "You've done your homework, Henry," he said, his tone softening. "This is more than enough to bury them if they fight." I nodded, my gaze drifting to the glass wall, its cold surface grounding me as the skyline sparkled beyond. The memory of Elizabeth surfaced, her warm eyes from the photo I'd held nights ago, urging me to protect what we'd built. The pain of her 2022 loss mingled with the sting of Michael's betrayal, but it didn't break me. It sharpened me. I'd spent decades at Pacific Builders finding weak points in structures, and now I was doing the same with their lies, their greed, their secrets. We discussed the contractor estimate Michael had waived at the first dinner, a $20,000 lie to mask their splurges now dwarfed by the affair evidence. "They're desperate," John said, stacking the papers. "They thought you'd roll over." My lips twitched a bitter smile. "They don't know me," I said, my voice steady, though my chest burned with the weight of their betrayal. The nursing home threat wasn't just a rumor, it was a plan to lock me away, to sell the house I'd built with Elizabeth, to erase our legacy. The pain of her loss, the sting of Michael's betrayal fueled me, but so did the clarity of what I had to do. The Seattle streets waited outside, the snow falling soft but relentless, mirroring my resolve. I stood, tucking the confirmation slip from the bank into my pocket, its crisp edges a reminder of the first blow landed. The office's hum swallowed my footsteps as I walked toward the door, the skyline outside gleaming through the snow-dusted glass, a city alive with possibility even in winter. I paused at the door, my hand on the handle, the weight of the folder under my arm grounding me. Michael's calls meant he was rattled. That was just the start. The trust, the will, the frozen account, they were feeling it now. The Seattle cold wrapped around me as I stepped out, but it didn't slow me down. The battle was far from over, and I was ready to keep pushing. The Seattle snow fell soft outside as I stepped into the house, the folder under my arm, heavier than ever, its pages loaded with the truth I'd built since that first Christmas dinner. John's office had armed me with eviction notices, a frozen account, and proof of Emily's affair, each document a brick in the wall I'd raised against Michael and Emily's lies. Sarah's warning about their grand Christmas plan to declare me unfit to push for guardianship echoed in my mind, their nursing home threats of fresh cut atop the $18,000 debt and secret hotel meetings I'd uncovered. The Washington night was quiet, but inside, my resolve roared, ready to face the family gathering where their deception would meet its end. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the old oak table draped in a white cloth set with Elizabeth's china, each plate a nod to better days. Relatives filled the chairs, Linda, Tom, cousins, Sarah, and neighbors, their faces a mix of anticipation and unease, the air thick with the scent of roasted turkey and pine. I sat opposite Michael. My hands folded the folder tucked beneath my chair, its weight a silent promise. Michael stood at the head, wine in hand, his polished smile as new as the watch on his wrist. Emily sat beside him, her posture perfect, eyes glinting with quiet triumph, as if they'd already won. I watched them, my face calm, though my pulse thrummed with the fire of purpose. Michael cleared his throat, the room falling silent except for the faint clink of forks. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice loud, practiced. "This Christmas is special. It's about family, about moving forward. But there's something we need to address." His gaze flicked to me, a flash of disdain crossing his features, his tone hardening. "Dad, we've talked. You're not well, this house, this life. It's too much for you. We voted as a family. You're no longer part of it. It's time to leave." A gasp rippled through the room, Linda's hand flying to her mouth. Tom, cousins leaning forward, frowning. Emily's smile widened thin and sharp as she nodded. The guests' shifting whispers breaking the silence. I stood slowly, my chair scraping the hardwood, the sound cutting through their murmurs. Every eye turned to me, the air thick with expectation. "Is that so, Michael?" I said, my voice steady, almost soft. "You've decided I'm done." He smirked, emboldened. "It's for your own good, Dad," he said. "You'll thank us later." I reached beneath the chair, pulling out the folder, its plain cover drawing curious glances. Michael's confidence held, but Emily's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. A parting gift. I said, my tone light, but edged with steel, sliding the folder across the table, its thud against the platter, silencing the room. Michael hesitated, his smirk faltering, then took the folder, his fingers brushing the paper, as if it might burn. He flipped it open, eyes scanning the first page, an eviction notice, bold and unyielding, addressed to him and Emily, 30 days to vacate under Washington law. His breath caught his hand trembling as he turned to the next document, a court order freezing their accounts, followed by a list of their $18,000 debts, designer splurges, and the condo overdue 3 times. The main twist landed pages revealing Emily's affair, screenshots of texts about secret hotel meetings, a man's name, not Michael's. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice cracking the folder, slipping papers scattering across the table. Wine glasses tipping red liquid spilling like blood across the cloth. Chaos erupted, guests leaning closer, grabbing papers, their whispers turning to murmurs of shock. Linda snatched a page, her eyes wide. "Michael, is this true?" she asked, her voice sharp. Emily stood, her face paling, her voice shaking. "This is a lie," she snapped, but her composure crumbled, mascara smudging as she clutched a napkin. I stepped back, my heart steady, triumph mixing with sorrow, as I watched their world unravel. The candles flickered, casting shadows across Michael's reddening face, his hands shaking as he tried to gather the papers. Emotionally, I stood at a crossroads, the victory bittersweet, my mindset clear. Karma crushes greed when lies are exposed. A lesson I'd learned through pain. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to confront lies head-on because truth is the sharpest weapon in family battles. The room was a storm, voices rising. Sarah pointing at Emily, her scarf slipping. "You lied to us," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You spread rumors, said he was crazy all to steal his home." Tom Cousins grabbed a transcript, his face hard. "This is you plotting to kick him out," he barked. "You called him a burden." My gaze stayed on Michael, his shoulders slumping, his glass clattering to the table, wine pooling around the scattered proofs. The folder had done its work, shattering their facade, but the pain of my son's betrayal lingered, a quiet ache beneath the triumph. I stood still, letting the chaos unfold, the truth sharper than any blade they'd tried to wield. The front door loomed in the distance, its frame outlined by the hallway's dim light, as guests murmured some reaching for coats. I didn't move, my hands in my pockets, watching Michael's world crack under the weight of his own lies. The battle wasn't over. Their pleas and denials were coming, and I was ready to face them. The Seattle night waited outside, snow falling soft, but my resolve was iron ready for the final reckoning. The dining room was a storm of voices, the candlelight flickering wildly as the folder's pages lay scattered across the oak table, wine pooling red around the turkey platter. Michael's screams still echoed from when I'd handed him the eviction notice, the frozen accounts, the $18,000 debt list, and the damning screenshots of Emily's affair, each truth a hammer blow to their facade. Guests leaned in, grabbing papers, their murmurs rising into a chaotic hum, the Seattle night outside silent under its snowy blanket. Linda clutched a transcript, her eyes blazing, while Sarah pointed at Emily, her scarf slipping, accusing her of lies. "Tom Cousins." My cousin held a page, his face hard with disgust. I stood still, my hands in my pockets, watching their world crack, the weight of betrayal lifting from my chest, replaced by a quiet triumph tinged with sorrow. Linda stood waving a bank statement, her voice cutting through the noise. "Michael, explain this," she demanded, her tone sharp as the Seattle wind. "You told us Henry was losing his mind, but this says you planned to sell his house." Michael slumped in his chair, his hands clutching his head, the eviction notice crumpled in his fist. "It's not true," he stammered, his voice breaking. "It's not what it looks like." Emily rose, her face flushed, her manicured nails digging into a napkin as she tried to salvage her crumbling image. "Everyone, please calm down," she said, her voice trembling. "There's been a misunderstanding. We only wanted what's best for Henry." Her words fell flat, the room's eyes turning cold, seeing through her polished lies. Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking with anger, her red scarf dangling. "Best," she snapped. "You lied to us, spread rumors he was crazy all to steal his home." She pointed at a screenshot, the affair text. Clear. "Meet me at the hotel, 8 p.m., a man's name, not Michael's." The twist deepened. Emily's affair fully exposed the room, gasping as the truth landed like a second blow. Michael's face went ashen, his eyes darting to Emily, who froze, her mascara smudging as she clutched the napkin tighter. "You," he whispered, his voice cracking. "How could you?" The guests erupted, voices overlapping, some grabbing more papers, reading aloud lines of their plot to declare me unfit to push for guardianship, to lock me in a nursing home. I stood at the edge of the chaos, my voice steady as I spoke, cutting through the storm. "It's mine. I said the house always was." The words were final, a claim rooted in decades of building this Seattle home with Elizabeth nail by nail, through overtime at Pacific Builders. The guardianship subplot resolved John's court order, blocking their scheme a detail I revealed, now holding up the legal paper. "This stops your guardianship," I said, my tone calm but unyielding. "Washington law protects me." Michael's shoulders shook, his plea rising. "Dad, please tell them it's a mistake. We didn't mean it like this." Emily grabbed his arm, her voice a desperate hiss. "Henry, we're sorry, we'll fix this. Just don't do this." I shook my head, stepping back, my boots heavy on the hardwood. "You had years to fix it," I said. "You chose greed instead." The room's noise swelled, guests moving now, some heading for the door, their coats in hand. Tom Cousins threw a paper back on the table, muttering about disgrace, his voice rough. Linda paused, her eyes soft with apology. "I should have known better, Henry," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." I nodded, saying nothing. The apologies hollow against the truth now laid bare. The folder had struck true, shattering their illusions, exposing the $18,000 lies, the affair, the guardianship plot, every syllable fuel for the fire I'd stoked. Emotionally, the weight in my chest lifted triumph, mixing with a quiet sorrow for the son I'd once held in 1983, now lost to greed and Emily's influence. My mindset settled, revelations free, the oppressed a truth carved from this battle. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to speak truth in family gatherings, because silence lets lies fester. The candles flickered, casting jagged shadows across the table, the spilled wine a stark reminder of their broken plans. Michael's hands trembled, trying to gather the papers, but Linda pulled them away, her face a mask of disgust. "Enough, Michael," she snapped. "You've shamed this family." The front door loomed in the distance, its frame outlined by the hallway's dim light, as guests began to leave, their murmurs fading into the night. I stood still, my hands in my pockets, watching Michael and Emily unravel. Their pleas grew desperate, Emily's voice cracking as she called after me, but I didn't turn. The dining room door swung shut behind me, muffling their words, the sound soft but final. The Seattle snow fell outside, blanketing the street, its quiet beauty a contrast to the storm I'd unleashed. I'd claimed my house, my life, but the cost was heavy, a son lost to his own choices. The fight wasn't over, one final reckoning waited, and I was ready to face it. The dining room chaos faded behind the closed door, the muffled pleas of Michael and Emily swallowed by the Seattle night as I stood in the hallway, my hands in my pockets, the weight of their betrayal lifting like snow melting in the sun. The folder's truth, the $18,000, lies, the affair, the guardianship plot had shattered their facade, leaving them exposed before the family. Linda's sharp demands, Tom Cousins' condemnation, Sarah's pointed accusations, they'd all turned the holiday table into a reckoning my house claimed as mine always was. The Seattle snow fell outside, its soft patter, a quiet contrast to the storm I'd unleashed, but the fight wasn't over. One final step remained, not for them, but for me, a step toward freedom. A few months later, I sat at a simple desk in my new apartment, the Seattle skyline winking through the wide window, snow dusting the glass in slow, heavy flakes. The bare walls felt unfamiliar, but the quiet was a balm, a stark contrast to the house I'd left behind. Boxes lined the room, some unpacked, others holding keepsakes of a life I'd built and lost. Elizabeth's scarf, a drawing Michael made at 6, a contract from my Pacific Builders days. I set a blank sheet of paper before me, the pen heavy in my hand, not with ink, but with the weight of what I needed to say. The city's lights blinked beyond, a reminder that life stretched on, even after betrayal. I began to write the words, coming slowly, my handwriting steady, despite the ache in my chest. "Michael," I wrote, "I've spent years wondering where I went wrong, what I could have done to keep you close. But you chose your path, and I had to choose mine." The letter wasn't for him, not really. It was for me, a way to shed the last of their weight. I'd sold the house to a young family, their laughter already filling its rooms, a new chapter for the home I'd built with Elizabeth nail by nail through overtime shifts. The sale was quick, the paperwork final, each signature a step toward freedom. My secret investments tucked away from my engineering days had secured this apartment, this new start, a quiet triumph they'd never know. The mini twist came as I paused, pen hovering, realizing I'd been richer than they ever suspected, not just in money, but in resilience. Michael and Emily had vanished after that Christmas dinner, their belongings cleared out before the eviction deadline, their silence a confirmation they'd burned their bridge. I didn't expect to hear from them, and I didn't want to. The investments hidden from even Elizabeth were my safety net, a legacy I'd protected when I saw Michael's greed grow since their 2015 wedding, when I gifted them the house rent-free. That foresight, born of my Pacific Builders days, mapping weak points, had saved me a lesson in vigilance I'd carry forward. Emotionally, I felt fulfilled not by their downfall, but by my own rise. The betrayal, the $18,000, lies the affair, the nursing home threats, they'd been a crucible forging me into someone stronger. My mindset settled true turning points come from within a truth carved from this fight. If I could tell anyone one thing, it's to embrace change after conflict, because freedom lies in letting go of what no longer serves you. The pen moved again, the words flowing. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need to move on. This is goodbye. I folded the letter, slipping it into a plain envelope, my fingers lingering as I set it on the desk. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was my release, a final act of self-care. I stood crossing to the window, the cold glass chilling my palm as the skyline sparkled through the snow. The city hummed below, alive with possibility, a stark contrast to the chaos of that holiday table. The memory of Michael's scream, Emily's crumbling facade played in my mind, but it was distant now, like a story I'd heard, not lived. The folder had been my weapon, its truths, eviction, frozen accounts, affair texts, shattering their lies. But this letter, this moment, was my victory, a mic drop on living unbound by greed. I grabbed my coat, the envelope crinkling in my pocket, and headed for the door. The post office was a short walk, and I'd mail it tonight, letting my words carry into the void. The apartment door clicked shut behind me, the sound soft but final, my boots leaving faint wet prints in the hallway. The snow fell heavier outside, covering old paths, making way for new ones. I'd built a life once in a house filled with Elizabeth's laughter and Michael's childhood dreams. That life was gone, but I wasn't. I was still here, standing tall at 68, with years left to shape something new. The Seattle skyline stretched before me, its lights a promise of what lay ahead. I stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut, and felt a quiet peace settle in my bones, ready to walk the new paths waiting below. If you felt the sting of family betrayal, or found strength in starting over, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your karma stories in the comments. Let's talk about those moments that set us free.